Welcome back to the channel Kind Tales. Today's story is a deeply spiritual journey about compassion, faith, healing, and the unseen ways in which God uses ordinary people to create extraordinary change. It reminds us that sometimes the miracle someone is waiting for does not descend from the sky. Sometimes, it walks into their life quietly, gently, in the form of another human heart. Our story begins with a man named Ethan Malik, a humble single father known for his soft smile and the calmness in his voice, a calmness shaped not by an easy life but by a soul that had learned to survive storms with dignity. After losing his wife years ago, Ethan raised his little daughter Aisha with a tenderness that came from both love and grief, a tenderness built on late-night prayers, early morning struggles, and a constant whisper to himself that he must stay strong, not because life was easy, but because a small pair of eyes needed him to be her anchor. Each morning before school, he would place his hand gently on Aisha's head and pray that her heart remained kind, even when the world failed to be. That little ritual was his way of choosing faith every day, his way of keeping light alive in a home that once felt too quiet. One cold November morning, as they walked toward the school building, Ethan's eyes fell upon someone new, a teenage girl standing near the gate, clutching an old backpack as if it were her only shield. Her name was Mina, a transfer student whose silence carried the weight of stories she had never told. She stood slightly curled inward, as though trying to take up less space, as though the world had taught her that she didn't deserve to be seen. Ethan noticed details others walked right past: the exhaustion beneath her eyelids, the faint trembling in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact with a kind of practiced fear. In class, she drifted through the hallways like a ghost, sitting alone even during breaks, opening an empty lunchbox and pretending to eat so no one would notice. Her teacher saw a quiet student. Ethan saw something else, the same loneliness he once felt after his wife's death, a loneliness that squeezed the heart until breathing felt like lifting stones. Days passed, and the image of Mina standing alone kept returning to Ethan's mind. Then one evening, as he stayed late to grade papers, he heard the sound of soft, muffled crying echoing from the stairwell. He followed the sound quietly and found Mina curled into herself at the bottom of the steps, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking. He didn't approach. He knew the dignity of someone's private pain should never be stolen, but when he noticed a folded document slip from her bag, he picked it up only to give it back. Yet the words on the page flashed before he could look away: temporary shelter permit expiring. His heart tightened. This girl wasn't just sad. She was homeless, living in a temporary shelter with days left before she would be forced to move again. Suddenly, all the small signs made sense: the empty lunchbox, the oversized clothes, the fear in her eyes. She had been trying to survive quietly, invisibly. The next morning, Ethan approached her gently. "Good morning, Mina," he said softly. She startled as if kindness itself was unfamiliar. When he asked whether she'd eaten breakfast, she shook her head with a hesitation that broke something inside him. Without another word, he offered her half of the sandwich in his bag. She tried to refuse at first, but when he insisted, she accepted with trembling hands. That simple act cracked something inside her, a tiny fracture in the walls she had spent years building. He didn't push or ask questions, he simply offered compassion with no strings attached. And sometimes, spiritual healing begins just like that. Not with grand gestures, but with a moment of human warmth in a cold world. A few days later, Ethan brought his daughter Aisha to school early, and the little girl noticed Mina sitting alone at a bench. "Daddy, why is she always alone?" she asked. Ethan looked down and replied with a gentle truth: "Maybe she's waiting for kindness." Without hesitation, Aisha walked up to Mina and said, "Hi. I'm Aisha. Do you want to sit with me today?" And in that simple invitation, a small miracle began. From that day forward, Aisha would bring extra snacks, cookies she helped bake, fruit she picked herself, and even drawings she made just for Mina. Slowly, Mina's eyes began to lift when someone approached her. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. Hope, a feeling she thought she had lost, began to flicker again. But life has a way of testing hearts just when they begin to heal. One afternoon, the school board held a meeting about Mina's living situation. The shelter was closing, and she would be transferred to a state-run facility known more for structure than warmth. When Ethan heard this, his heart sank. He knew that placing her in such an environment would crush the fragile hope that had just begun to grow in her. He returned home that night with a heavy heart, walking beside little Aisha who held his hand tightly. As he tried to think of what could be done, Aisha looked up and spoke the words that shook him to his core. "Daddy, why can't she stay with us?" He stopped walking. The streetlights cast a gentle glow on his daughter's innocent face, and he realized that sometimes God speaks through the purest hearts, using them to guide those who have forgotten the bravery of compassion. "You always say faith means giving from what we have," she continued softly, "not waiting until we have more." Ethan knew she was right. For years, he had prayed for guidance, for a deeper purpose, for a way to live a life that honored both God and the memory of his late wife. And perhaps, this was the answer. That night, he sat alone in the dim living room, whispering a prayer into the quietness. "Do I have enough strength to help her? Enough resources? Enough wisdom?" The answer he felt was simple. You don't need to have enough. You only need to be willing. The next day, he met with child services, the principal, and shelter representatives. With calm conviction, he offered his home as a foster placement for Mina. The room fell silent. A single father volunteering to care for a teenage girl was unexpected, but sincerity radiated from him like sunlight through clouds. When they told Mina the option, she didn't speak at first. She simply looked down, then up, and then tears dropped one by one, not from sadness but from disbelief. No one had ever chosen her before. No one had fought for her. Now, someone was offering her a home. When Mina stepped into Ethan's house for the first time, she paused at the doorway, holding her small bag of belongings. It wasn't the size of the home that made her eyes fill with tears, it was the warmth. Aisha stood there holding a drawing that said, "Welcome home, Mina," surrounded by little hearts and flowers. Ethan showed her the guest room, a simple bed, a second-hand dresser, and a small lamp Aisha insisted would help her sleep better. That night, Mina cried silently into her pillow, but for the first time in years, her tears were tears of safety, relief, and an overwhelming sense of being wanted. Healing did not happen in one glorious moment. It happened slowly, gently, like the soft turning of seasons. There were nights when Mina woke up shaking from nightmares, days when she panicked at sudden noises, moments when she apologized excessively because she feared being a burden. But Ethan never raised his voice, never asked her to get over it, never made her feel like she was too much. Instead, he taught her how to breathe through panic, how to repeat prayers when fear returned, how to recognize that she was finally safe. He reminded her that healing was not a straight line, it was a sacred journey. Aisha taught her laughter, spinning her around in the living room, painting her nails, sitting beside her with childish excitement, telling her that sisters don't have to match blood to match hearts. Slowly, Mina began to trust. She began to smile more, speak more, breathe easier. One afternoon, as she helped Ethan prepare dinner, she asked the question she had been holding deep inside. "Why did you help me? You didn't even know me." Ethan paused, then looked at her with a softness that felt like a blessing. "Because once, someone helped me when I was breaking," he said quietly. "And because I saw you waiting for a chance. And I realized, maybe God was asking me to create one." Her eyes filled with tears again. Tears of gratitude, of healing, of realization that kindness can be powerful enough to rewrite a person's destiny. With stability, love, and emotional support, Mina began to flourish. She joined the art club, volunteered at reading programs, and slowly reclaimed the parts of herself she had abandoned long ago. Teachers praised her growth, and counselors admired her resilience. But the greatest transformation was internal. She no longer walked with her head down. She looked people in the eye. She spoke with confidence. She believed in her future again. She believed in goodness again. She believed in herself again. And as for Ethan, he realized that sometimes, family is not formed by blood, but by compassion. Sometimes God brings people together not by accident, but by divine arrangement. Sometimes the blessing you give becomes the blessing that transforms your own life. Mina found a home, Aisha found a sister, and Ethan found a deeper purpose. Their home, once quiet and filled with echoes of grief, was now full of laughter, healing, growth, and a love woven from grace. And that, dear listeners, is the sacred message of this story. Sometimes the miracle we pray for is not delivered to us. Sometimes heaven asks us to become the miracle for someone else. Sometimes faith is not waiting for doors to open, it is deciding to open one yourself. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the turning point of someone's entire life. And the chance we create for others becomes the chance that transforms us as well.